Bolts Nation, welcome to another episode of the Bolts Block Party, powered by our friends at Highlight IPA. Wolfie here, your co-captain. Braydon Coburn is here, and we're actually in the TGH Iceplex today as the boys are practicing before they get ready to hit the road to take on the Florida Panthers on Sunday. But we brought in the longtime Lightning voice, the play-by-play since 2002, the great Dave Mishkin joins us. Dave, we're so excited that you've taken the time out of your busy book novel schedule to sit down with Kobe and I. We really do appreciate it.
Well, look, this is part of that schedule. At least I was told. But this is like a crossover episode.
Yeah, we're going to do a little crossover stuff.
Yeah.
Because I tried to do as much digging as I could, and there's not a whole lot about the backstory of how Dave Mishkin landed with the Tampa Bay Lightning. And I would love for you to kind of go through.
Tells you how long I've been here, probably.
Yeah, well, I know
before the internet.
I mean, really, like right around that time, though. 2002 is when you kind of jumped aboard here, but you spent 11 years prior to that broadcasting in the minor. It was with the Johnstown Chiefs, the Hershey Bears. But where did it really all begin for you and your love for hockey and broadcasting? Because that obviously had to come from somewhere.
Yeah, you grew up in New York City, is that right?
New York until I was 9, and then New England.
Okay.
Yeah.
So actually, this is not something you would have been able to find.
Okay.
1978, there was a little bit of a rivalry happening between the Boston Red Sox and the New York Yankees.
Sure.
Summer of 1978, my family moves from New York City to basically the Boston area.
Okay.
But I had grown up kind of a Mets fan. Like, the Mets were my team. I didn't really know about the American League. I wasn't really following the Yankees.
Okay.
So I had no problem crossing over and becoming a Red Sox fan.
Interesting.
Which served me well as I grew up in the Boston area. But that was like a white hot rivalry.
Yeah, for sure.
Summer. So to kind of make that transition at that time was interesting. Of course, the Yankees ended up beating them in the one-game playoff and ended up winning the World Series. So New York and New England.
Okay.
And so was that your favorite sport, or did you play sports, or were you kind of more on the outside of that, or just more just a fan?
Well, I played some sports. I didn't play high-level sports.
Yeah, but
there was a ceiling there.
I don't think that really matters.
No,
You know,
I was a sports enthusiast, but no, I liked all the sports. So getting to kind of your question,
Sure.
Greg. So in college, as
Yale.
a freshman at Yale,
What are your SAT scores, can I ask?
I don't remember.
I think
That's
pretty
probably
damn good to
and
get
I don't
in Yale.
I'm not sure it would get me in now. It's gotten a lot more
Okay.
competitive.
Yeah.
So as a freshman, I was a sports fan. So I went to the football games,
Okay.
and Ivy League football is Ivy League football. I mean, occasionally there's like the punter makes the NFL. It is what it is.
True.
It's still competitive sports,
Absolutely.
and the athletes there are very, very talented. And so we segued into winter, and so I went to a prep school, Choate.
Okay.
Choate has high-level hockey.
Okay.
I was like not rooming, but like in the same dorm with some guys who played on the hockey team. They went on to play D1.
Sure.
So I actually knew some of the players on visiting teams that were coming in, but I was like going to the games and watching Yale play. So Yale hockey plays Division I. Like
Yep.
it is
Big
the
deal.
highest level.
Right.
There are 6 Ivy League schools that play Division I, and they're in the ECAC, which at the time that I was going to school, there were 4. It's kind of
Changed.
splintered or maybe even
Yep.
consolidated now, but the ECAC still exists. Vermont, where Marty St. Louis played, that was in the ECAC. John
Mhm.
LeClaire was actually at Vermont when I
Mhm.
was at Yale. So I saw some really good players come in, but I didn't do any broadcasting. So I'm sitting in one of the dining halls the beginning of my sophomore year, and this is really going back, but they used to have things called table tents.
Oh, imagine that.
Yeah. So it's like basically a holder for
Right. For
promotional
materials,
events. Right. So this guy comes by the table I'm at and sticks a flyer into the holder.
Yep.
And I see it's like for a promotion for the Yale Brown football game at the beginning of the year. Yale Brown football game that Sunday. It was played Saturday, but the college station had like only the rights to play it delayed, right?
Gotcha.
The
Right.
commercial station,
Right.
you know where I'm coming from here. Greg.
100%.
They had the live broadcast.
Get
The
it.
students was like, you can do the game and then play it like 24 hours later.
Right.
So I looked at him like, that sounds fun. I wonder if I could do that. And the guy was still, he's like, well, we're having an introductory meeting like in a couple of nights. Why don't you come on by?
Right.
So I did. And what I learned was that, so WYBC was the college station, mostly music, but they had a sports department.
Mm-hmm.
And my sophomore year, the sports department consisted of basically all seniors and no juniors.
Okay.
So the incoming group were all sophomores like me and freshmen. So my sophomore year, I did a lot of what was called dummy broadcasts,
Okay.
where you actually bring a tape recorder, and this was back in the
Take it
day,
back.
actual tape recorder with a cassette tape, and I'd go to football games in this instance and practice doing play-by-play.
Oh, very cool.
Into the recorder.
Got
and
it.
then we segued into winter, and I would go to hockey games and practice into the recorder. And it got to be so much a part of my routine that like I'd go to a game without a recorder and just start doing the play-by-play.
And how much did that help you? Like, how much did that refine your skills of being able to go back and listen to it and then kind of, develop your style?
Well, you've had a little experience with this now, right? Going back and
It's a loaded question.
Yes. So the short answer is yes, but it was very early days. And what I did was I shared it with the seniors too.
Sure.
So I got some feedback from them. And I should mention, we also had a talk show where that was a way to get people on the air.
Gotcha.
And you could have 4 or 5 students. We talk about what's happening in the NFL that week,
right,
or with Yale sports or whatever.
Variety
so I was
show.
getting I was getting reps on air.
Yep.
But the practicing of the play-by-play I kind of did on my own. So yes, I go back and listen. But what I discovered was I had a knack for what was needed to do hockey,
Okay.
which was seeing, digesting, and regurgitating fairly quickly.
How long did that take you though?
Well,
to hone that in. Obviously, they say a master 10,000 hours, right? But you do that so well, and to follow the game, it's really truly an art form, and it's very hard to do. So, where, like Kobe said, like where did you feel that there has to be that defining moment where you got it, like a light bulb went off, and you got it, and you've honed in on that. But when did that happen? Was there a specific moment that you kind of knew?
Well, thank you for the compliment. But what people are hearing now is after
20 plus years.
Well, longer than that. I mean,
for sure.
yeah,
Way longer.
11 years in the minors,
Yeah.
and a couple of years in college as well. So how I sounded on those early dummy tapes
Sure.
sounded very, very different. But I don't know that there was the moment was I can actually keep up with the play. Like, ooh, that number 55, that's Coburn. And I'm registering that. So when Coburn gets the puck, I know it's him.
Yep.
Now, maybe my delivery would get a little smoother.
Sure.
I wouldn't stumble and bumble as
Right.
much. But kind of the meat and potatoes of hockey play-by-play is, can you keep up with the play, or else you're running up a muddy hill in slippers.
Sure.
And
Understood.
you need to find another sport.
Right. And there's a certain style to it. I know you have a particular style. You like to call exactly where the puck is and what's
Yes.
happening. And I've heard you explain it as, I want to give the listener what I would want to hear. Other guys have little different styles of listen to a bunch of different guys, but like your specific style, is that kind of how you base it? Is like, I want to give people what I want to hear when they're listening to a hockey game.
Well, I think that's a good philosophy to have as a broadcaster.
Sure.
What do you like to hear? Because there are a lot of different styles, and there's no one right style or wrong style. So yes, if I were a listener and I couldn't see what's happening, I would want to know exactly what is happening in it. And that was something I used in other sports too. Like if I was calling a football game, I was very descriptive about like where the running back was running with the ball and
Right.
where he made his cut, et cetera, et cetera. But I basically went into this with 2 general tenets about how I wanted to call a game based on what I wanted to hear as a listener, what I liked hearing as a listener. One was on kind of the sliding scale of, at one end, you're like uber descriptive, and then at the other end, you're maybe pretty narrative. And by narrative, I mean, you're on the puck, but you're kind of guiding the puck.
Sure.
And you're getting in a little bit of like a side dish here,
Right.
and a little flavor there. You're talking about a guy's hometown. There's nothing wrong with that.
Which works on TV because they also have that extra element of being able to see where the puck is,
Correct.
right? But on the radio, it's a different animal.
But Kobe, I will say this, that the people that tend to be more narrative are still doing a good job. It's how do you want to go about it? And I decided I wanted to be uber descriptive. So like, let's say there's a nothing D to D pass. There's a line change happening. Nothing is happening. I'm still calling that D to D pass. Somebody else might use that opportunity as like, nothing's happening
Right.
here. I'm going to get into something else. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just, what style do you want? So that was one tenet. The other tenet was I always liked listening to announcers who weren't shy about showing enthusiasm for the team they represented if they were a team broadcaster.
Okay.
Right. And who were some of those people that were early influences on you that you like to listen to?
Well, I mentioned the Mets.
Yep.
I remember following them, but really it was in Boston. So Johnny Most with the Celtics, he was very pro Celtics.
Mm-hmm.
The Bruins announcers were Fred Cusick and John Pearson. They were very pro Bruins. The Red Sox announcers were less so on radio. It was Ken Coleman and Joe Castiglione, but they were pro Red Sox.
Right.
And I liked that. I liked feeling that they were representing my emotions.
Sure.
Right. So clearly I am known for getting enthusiastic and loud
A little bit.
something happens that's good for the Lightning or any team that I'm representing. And I probably sound a little different now than I did when I was 18 and 19. I'm maybe a little bit more pipsqueaky and like,
Yeah.
you know, like
Right.
it comes with a little bit of experience, although I can still get pipsqueaky if the moment is right or wrong. But that was something I believed I wanted to incorporate as a broadcaster. And I wasn't going to shy away from, if I felt there was a big play,
Yep.
I was reacting the same way as if I would have reacted if I were watching the game on my sofa.
Which is
Right.
awesome.
And that was a choice I made. But like I said, there's no right or wrong choice in how you go about this. Kind of in my mind, there are some objective standards that you need to meet. Let's say hockey play-by-play in the radio.
Okay.
Got to stand the puck to keep up with the play.
True.
Got to be able to identify the players. If there's no score handy, like if we're talking like you're in your car, you cannot take your eyes off the road,
Right.
need to get the score in.
Sure.
What's the first thing somebody wants to know
The score.
if they're putting the game on?
The score.
What's the score?
Right.
And where are we in
And
the
you
game?
always are weaving that into the
I
fabric.
try and get
do.
that in. I think that there are some objective standards that you should meet, but there aren't many. And
Right.
then after that,
Hands. It's just free for all.
yeah, it's like a la carte.
Yeah.
Like, what do you want? What do you like as a listener or a viewer? And I've tried to follow that.
So were you really honing that stuff in when you had graduated and you started with Johnstown and then obviously the Hershey Bears? Is that really where you kind of honed in on your craft?
Well, I think that philosophy of how I wanted to call games was true from the get-go. So I got about in hockey
Mm-hmm.
because my junior year, I kind of took over the sports department, became co-sports director, and nobody wanted to do hockey. So I'm like, well, I'll take hockey. So we did most of the games. We did all the home games and this weird commercial station deal. They had the rights to the road Ivies.
Okay.
So like there were 5 other Ivy League teams. So we didn't have the rights to those games, but then there were a bunch that were non-Ivy, like RPI,
Okay.
Vermont,
Yep.
Clarkson, St. Lawrence. So we had the rights to those games. So me and another student, we'd drive up and we'd do the games. There was a couple of times we got to go on the bus, like St. Lawrence and Clarkson, or you might even know where they were right on, like they are as far upstate New York as you
Sure.
can get from New Haven, Connecticut. That's
Sure.
a hike. There was one trip where the coach was like, you can ride the bus. Go ahead. Yeah, it's fine.
Thank you.
So like I got about 55, 60 games worth of experience. So you're like, well, how did you hone your craft? Well, you're constantly honing your craft. But like game 5 sounded way different than game 45. And like
of course.
game 55 was probably a little farther along than game 45. And so by the time I was a senior and graduating, I was able to put together a demo
Okay.
that I felt put me in the best light possible. And how many other students had the opportunity to call Division I hockey?
I'm sure.
So I'm like, I'm dealing with a smaller pool here
Right.
of potential competitors,
Yeah.
essentially. And so I blanketed really North America. I wasn't going to get a job north of the border, but I sent demos there anyway.
Sure.
But every minor league in the U.S. got a demo from me.
Interesting.
That is not
demo.
Mishkin demos.
Yeah.
I'd love to get my
Anybody has
hands on
one,
that.
right?
Yeah.
If anybody's got one, send it our way.
Well, we would need a tape recorder
We
to
would.
listen to.
Yeah.
We probably still have.
I had them for a while. I think they finally, I parted ways. I'm like, I can't keep carrying all these boxes
Yeah.
around of these cassette tapes. Once I got with a team, I kind of learned that it's different. When you're with a team, it's bad form to just blanket it.
Yeah.
Like if you're in the ECHL, you're just like, I want to get a job in the AHL. I'm going to send a tape to every single AHL team.
Sure.
Not cool.
Right.
Because those broadcasters in the AHL may be working in the office and seeing your
Sure.
resume
Right.
come in. It's like, I have this job, dude.
Right.
it's a little different. But when you're on the outside and you don't know anyone, it's fine.
Right.
So there were 3 expansion teams coming in. This was heading into the 91-92 season.
Okay.
3 expansion teams coming into the ECHL. I'm like, well, I know they're going to need broadcasters.
Mm-hmm.
And I got an interview with one of them. They basically wanted me to start like in March. I'm like, I got 2 months left before I graduate. I can't do that. So I'm like, well, maybe it's not going to happen. Turned out I got a job in Johnstown. They had a team. They had a broadcaster. But what happened was the GM decided that because the broadcaster worked for the radio station,
Okay.
all that guy did was broadcast the games. Then he had a job
Sure.
at the station on air.
Right.
He's like, we're going to move this position in-house. We want to pay somebody not very much money
Always.
to broadcast all the games and do PR, sales, promotions, marketing,
Everything.
every game program, all of it.
Wow.
So my demo comes arriving just as this decision is made. It's like the stars align, right? But how many demos did I send out that the stars weren't aligned? So like, it's a numbers game, but I got lucky that they were looking to make this change.
I mean,
at the time mine came in, but I also gave myself an opportunity. I had the 60 games of experience.
Right.
I worked a part-time job in the sports information office at Yale. So I had some writing experience. Our station, college station, we did take ads. I didn't do a lot of selling, but I had a little bit of experience there. So like,
you're the guy.
golden.
Yeah.
And I'm like, just pay me enough to give me a roof over my head
Yes.
and
Right.
and get some food on my table. And I will tell you, Johnstown, Pennsylvania in 1991, the cost of living,
Right.
I mean, it's still pretty low,
Sure.
but it was very low. So that's how I got the first job.
Wow.
And,
So
and you guys could probably appreciate once you're in,
Yeah.
Yeah.
it's a different ball game.
For
Like,
sure.
2+ years of doing maybe 60 games. That first year, I think I did 72.
Wow.
It's a regular season.
Yeah.
ECHL played 72 plus playoffs.
Yeah.
And that's when you get the reps.
So before you get to Johnstown and you're doing all this stuff at Yale and you're kind of just starting to realize that, hey, maybe this is like a career passion that I have, a career path I want to take. What do your parents say? You're at Yale.
Right.
I don't know if they had some sort of aspiration, like, Dave's going to do this or this. And then you come to them and you're saying, hey, I have this undying passion for hockey and broadcasting, and I really want to pursue this. Were they supportive of that decision you had?
Well, it helped that I got a job right out of school, right?
Right.
If I hadn't, I'm not quite sure what they would have thought. But they're like, yeah, I mean, he's finding someone to pay him. Let's see if it leads to anything. And honestly, like, we talk about timing being everything. It was a lot easier to make it work making what I was making, which really wasn't very much, but it was fine because I was a single dude,
Right.
I didn't have a lot of needs
Right.
per se. And working the hours that I was working at 22 would have been a lot harder at 42
Understood.
with a family.
Right.
By the time that part of my life kind of fell into place, I had moved up,
Situated, right? Yeah,
right?
situated at that point.
The money part of it and kind of the part outside the I love this job part of it
Yes.
made sense also. So like you ask about my folks, they were like, well, look, he's 22, found a job, he's making it work. Let's see where it leads. And within 3 years, I got the Hershey job. So Hershey was in the AHL. So that's one step below the NHL, a little bit more money.
Mhm.
And I was there 8 years. So, I mean, my starting salary in Hershey was different
Then when you ended.
what I was making by the time I left and
Sure.
got the job with the Lightning. But I showed progression. I wasn't just stuck in one place
Right.
for a decade.
Right.
And I think that made a difference.
You would have had, at that time you mentioned 22, you would have been the same age as a lot of the players that you were calling. How is your relationship with those guys? Like, was that different now than your relationship now with, like, I don't know how you would relate as much to a player now as you did when you first started doing this, because you guys would have had been similar age, similar circumstance,
Right.
Guys playing in the East Coast, they're living on pizza boxes,
Right.
Yeah.
lunches, and, living together too. So I'm just curious about that relationship early on with the players.
The age had something to do with it, Kobe, but also the job had something to do with it, because at the minor league level, I mean, I'll use Lightning examples here, but I was not just Dave Mishkin, the announcer. I was Brian Briesman, the PR person.
Right.
I was the partnership person who was pulling in players for an appearance at a local car dealer. And really significantly, this isn't the only reason that they tried to be nice to me, but like, Kobe's playing in the minors and we're playing on the road and he didn't get an assist on a play. I know he deserved it. He knows he deserved an assist. Who's he coming to?
Right.
Mish, I didn't get an assist on the second goal. What are they watching? I'm like, I don't know what they're watching, but we're not at the age where we can just call it up on the internet.
Yeah.
Right. Like this has to be like, we need to cut it onto a cassette tape, mail it to the league,
Okay.
and have them add that assist, which you earned.
Right.
Like you're getting it.
Right.
But I'm going to have to do a little
And I'll tell you,
heavy lifting.
as a player, that goes a long way.
Sure.
Because, you know, well, for whatever reason, points and assists and goals, it matters.
Absolutely.
You know, it matters in your livelihood, and you want to make sure you have those numbers, and maybe that makes you stick out as a guy from the East Coast trying to make it up to the American League, right? So all those different metrics, and guys, sometimes the guys have bonuses attached to their contracts. So the fact that you would do that, I think would, you know, you would be beloved by the players just for that.
Well,
fact.
beloved is probably a little too strong a word, but like it was just a different vibe. When I got to the NHL, there was a little bit more of, it wasn't a line, but maybe it was like a dotted line.
Like a little more separation.
I'm more media.
Yeah.
I'm not Brian Briesman.
Right.
Right.
Well, your day-to-day with the players is different, right?
Day to day with the players is different. Like access to the, I mean,
And you're
You
not
were a
getting
player
you're not
with
getting
the
me a
light-
car deal.
Yeah. Like
Right.
you were a player with the Lightning, Kobe, while I was a broadcaster with the Lightning. I think we have a much different relationship now that you're retired.
Yeah, absolutely.
Than when you were a player. So if I went to Kobe and was like, hey, you know, can I get an interview or even just have a conversation? It was usually at a set time when
Yep.
the room was open.
Right.
And it was kind of, I mean, if you had a kid, I might be like, hey, how's your kid? You know, like you just had a baby. I might ask like, how's fatherhood, you know, everything. But mostly it was kind of like, what do you think about this team? And like, you know, how are you going to attack them? Or, you know, what's the strategy of dealing with defending Ovechkin or
Sure.
so? It's much more business-like.
Right.
But what I found is those players with whom I've kind of interacted with in a more business-like manner, they're friendly, like
Sure.
they're cordial. Once they retire, the
Right.
dynamic
Of course.
changes
Absolutely.
a little
100%.
bit.
So-
Same thing with Cully. Like Jason Cullimore, we've done a lot of games together over the years, and I know way more about him now than I did when
Well, you-
he played.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So, 02, how did you have to apply for the Lightning? Did somebody reach out to you and said, this would be a great gig for you? Like, how did that whole come?
So I got the job in Hershey in 94,
Yep.
and now I'm in the AHL. So to me, I'm like, I can apply for NHL jobs, and
Yep.
I may have a puncher's chance here. But like one job opens is like, you know, ants to the honey,
Of
right?
course.
Like just
Right.
everyone's sending in their stuff. So usually you need something to separate you. Not that the applicants aren't qualified, but it's kind of like, it's not the old boys network, but what it is, it's like this. If you're going to make this hire, the last thing you want to do is go back a year later and say, we messed up.
Right.
We need to make another hire. So if everybody who sends in a demo is good enough to be hired on the air, what is going to separate you?
Right.
It's all the other stuff.
Sure.
So how do you find out about that other stuff? Hockey's a small world,
Yep.
but generally, like if you're AHL affiliate, you have a good relationship with the people there. Usually you can get very good information about like all the stuff about the broadcaster, and maybe you know the broadcaster too. If you're the director of broadcasting or the general manager, let's say, of an NHL team, you're like, okay, we have an opening for a broadcaster's position. Well, we have this AHL team. There's a broadcast. He's been there 10 years.
Right.
And we've heard really, the players who've come up have kind of told us about him, and we know the organization well enough that he's a team player, or she
Mm-hmm.
shows up on time, you know, not a me
Right.
person,
Right.
you know, well received, will do a good job. Like as much as you want an assurance that you don't have to go back and do another hire a year later, you're going to take it.
Yep.
Right. And some teams want to reward their AHL affiliate. So the jobs that came up from 94 to 02 for me, first of all, I think we were at the Flyers actually, Kobe. I don't know if you knew that, my first 2 years in Hershey, and then the Flyers started their own AHL team, the Phantoms.
Yeah, right across.
When they moved from the Spectrum, they put the Phantoms in the Spectrum.
Interesting, like because the two teams were basically at the practice rink, they were side by side. So the dressing room was side by side. If you got called up, you just walked across the hallway with your bag and you put your stuff in the Flyers room.
Interesting.
Well, it also worked the other way. You know,
yeah.
if you weren't up to speed, like it was very easy to be sent down. So it was, that whole process. And sometimes people don't realize, when they call a guy up from Syracuse, that's a whole production of trying to get that player from Syracuse to wherever the Lightning to play. And, you're traveling that day, or maybe there's like someone sick and we need you right away. Well, that's just comes some added stress that happens when there's a call up, but having that convenience of having your minor league team close or right across the hall.
And Hershey was close to Philly.
Yeah.
But not across the street.
Right. Yeah.
So they had this empty building because they moved from the Spectrum. They're like, we're putting an AHL team in there. While I was with the Bears, the Flyers had an opening, but they hired somebody else, and I was new in Hershey. After that, like, we were with Colorado, and Colorado was set. So there were other jobs that opened, but I wasn't really a strong contender just based on circumstance.
Sure.
So when we switch affiliates and we go with Colorado, the previous affiliate for Colorado, which had just moved from Quebec. So all this kind of happened within a couple of years. So they were the Quebec Nordiques in 94, 95. Their AHL affiliate played in Cornwall, Ontario. They were the Cornwall Aces.
Okay.
95, 96, Quebec moves to Colorado, but they're still with the Cornwall Aces.
Okay.
I don't think they wanted to stay in Cornwall.
Which is normal because a lot of minor league teams, that affiliation switches like constantly.
Gotcha.
And that's what happened here.
Okay.
So Cornwall, they wanted out of Cornwall.
Got it.
So we have an opening because the Flyers left us. Well, it was interesting. Hershey and Cornwall were like bitter, hated rivals. Like, we played them in the playoffs in 94, 95, my first year. And Cornwall beat Hershey and had beaten Hershey the year before when Hershey was the higher seed. 95, 96, it was a really nasty rivalry. Okay. So then what happens? Many of the Hershey players that were playing for the Bears in 95, 96 are now part of the Philadelphia Phantoms.
Okay.
And all of these Cornwall Aces come to play in Hershey, and our fans are like, we used to hate this guy,
right?
But now he plays for us. So
we love
and
that.
Hershey and Philadelphia, the minor league teams, had this incredible, fierce rivalry. But the coach of those Cornwall teams came to become the coach of the Hershey Bears, and that was Bob Hartley.
Okay.
Who would end up going on to coach in the NHL, coached you, Kobe in Atlanta, but won a Calder Cup with us, but won a Stanley Cup with Colorado.
Yeah.
So Bob and I, we hit it off really well. And that first year, the Bears win the Calder Cup, beat Philadelphia in the second round, won Game 7 in their building, go on and win the Calder Cup. And winning a championship is special.
Sure.
Like, I've been very privileged to call 3 cups with the Lightning, but I had the 1 Calder Cup with Hershey. And like, there is a connect, more so for the players, but I got a ring. I mean, so when this job came up for the Lightning, first of all, Jay Feaster hired me in Hershey in 94.
Oh.
In 98, he leaves to join the Lightning as an assistant general manager.
Right.
In February of 02, he gets promoted to general manager. So now he's the GM of the Lightning. Talk about like, I'm not sure if I want to hire this guy. He actually hired me in Hershey.
Right.
He made the hire in Hershey. So that summer, I get a call from Jay, and he's like, our radio guy, John Allers, is up for the Anaheim TV job. Get your stuff down here. So GM doesn't make the hire at the NHL level. But I will say that the GM at the time delivered my material. Hand delivered my material.
He was
Jason
your advocate.
Dixon,
Yeah, he was.
who was in charge of kind of making the hire.
Yep.
And Jason laughed at me later. He's like, yeah, you basically had to like
This is your guy.
So
chop off my desk legs to not get the job.
Right.
But here's the end of the story. So it was the business side. So the business side, Jason Dixon did the hire, but he basically reported to Ron Campbell, who was the president of the team. So Jay Feaster is like, we need to get this thing across the finish line. So he called Bob Hartley. He's like, they called me Commish. In Hershey, I was Commish. He's like, Commish is up for this job. We need you to get this across the finish line. And Hartley is the flair for the dramatic. You probably experienced that, Kobe, having played for him. So Bob Hartley calls up Ron Campbell. And at this point, Bob is about a year removed from winning the Stanley Cup with Colorado. Calls up Ron Campbell. He's like, I'm so sure you're going to love this guy. If after 1 year you don't, I'll pay his first year salary.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty awesome endorsement.
So you talk about the relationships that you form. And I don't think Bob would have made that call if he didn't believe it.
Sure.
That I would be well received.
Yes.
But that was my journey to the NHL. And then, it's a new market.
Yeah.
People aren't used to me.
Right.
I kind of have to
make a name for yourself?
Well, yeah, but I just do what I do. This is what I've done for 11 years in the minors. I'm going to do it the same way. And I caught a break in that I arrived, the Lightning got really good, really quickly. So I had some memorable moments over those first 2 years, playoff runs, Marty scoring. I mean, I'm not going to forget about Calgary, but my first year, he scores in triple overtime in Washington. Lightning won their first ever playoff series. Like, I'm on that call, right? Yeah. I get to make that call because I'm along for the ride. So it's been a terrific ride with the Lightning ever since.
You show up in Tampa, and does your job description, is it just, you're just calling radio, or are you also asked to do some of the other stuff you'd been doing previously, as far as, helping out on the promotion side or the media side or whatever? Or is it just now it's Dave Mishkin, broadcaster?
Yeah, it's more the latter. Because at the NHL, at the minor league level,
you needed to do it.
You don't have as big of a staff.
Right.
So everyone who's there has to wear
I'm just remembering the Lightning in 2002. It's still, like I remember, what is it, Phil, he's like handing out, teaching people about the game and all this stuff. So I guess they were a little bit removed from that, but not much removed, right?
Yeah. And even the organizations that, let's say, are struggling to fill the seats, although the Lightning filled the seats as I got there because the team started winning.
Right.
And there's no greater sales tool than having a good team.
Yeah, everyone wants to be a part of a winner.
Of course.
But basically at the NHL level, like if you're a broadcaster, you broadcast.
Correct.
If you do PR, do PR.
Right.
If you are a salesperson, you sell.
Right.
There is a little bit of crossover. And this is actually, kind of a segue to the writing of the book, although this is way different than anything I'd done previously. Like I'd always done a lot of writing. In the minors, I wrote game program features, press releases. So when I got to the Lightning, Bill Wickett, who was basically my boss, was like, well, what do you think about like writing for our website?
Right.
Which we had a website at that point. I did a little bit of writing in the early years. That's picked up.
Sure.
And probably for the last, So, in the last decade plus, I've done a lot of writing, contributing to the website because I like doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And the Lightning have been great. It's kind of like what you're asking, Kobe. Nobody came to me and said, you need to do this. But it's kind of like, well, what do I like to do that can help kind of pull on the rope here?
Right.
And so Wickett's great. He's
awesome.
He's referred to as one of the best bosses for a reason.
Yep.
But he was always like receptive.
Right.
Stella, my therapy dog.
Right.
Like I went to him, like, I got this Bernese Mountain Dog. It was during COVID. I'm like, I'd like to get her certified to do therapy. Like, what do you think about me like volunteering at a hospital? He's like, yes, I love it. Absolutely do it. Even though that meant that, I don't punch a clock, but it's kind of like I'm contributing hours of my own volition. But every time I go into TGH, I'm wearing the Lightning brand, right? So, the Lightning are getting kind of the benefit of my position and doing something, but I'm doing this because I want to do it. And the Lightning throughout my time here have been great about anything that I felt like doing on top of the broadcasting. They've been really receptive about, do it. Absolutely.
So Stella, like, how did that whole thing come about? And I'm still trying to look up volition here.
Spell that. There's going to be a test later.
Well, I did go to Yale.
There we go.
Some stuff sunk in.
Yeah, so you and Stella, you guys do frequent visits over at TGH. Like, you're just visiting sick patients.
Well, we've always been an animal family, and my wife is very committed to rescue, as am I.
Sure.
So, like, we've always had one dog, but we've had multiple cats, and we get them from rescue because they need a home.
They do.
Stella is a Bernese Mountain Dog. You're not going to see many of those dogs in rescue.
Yeah.
And their price tag is 4 digits.
Sure.
Like if you're getting a puppy, people know, like if you're getting a bred dog, it is really expensive. And my wife has always been like, why are people, like, she's almost indignant. Like, there are all these animals that need homes. Like, why are these people spending all of this money on a breed? So I was like, all right, well, I kind of like Bernese Mountain Dogs, but I'm never going to really say we're going to get one.
Sure.
So, but she knew that. So we went to a dog show in 2019 at the fairgrounds because dog shows are neat in the early rounds before you get to like Best in Show, which I made a movie about where you're seeing like the top dogs. But like, let's say I want to see a Saint Bernard. So go to the like qualifying rounds for the Saint Bernards and you'll see like 20 Saint Bernards.
Sure.
So I was like, I want to go and see all the Bernese Mountain Dogs when they come to this dog show because they're not really a Florida dog. So we went. And we met a couple that actually bred these dogs there up in Tallahassee, which I was surprised by because this is not really a dog that you see in Florida.
Right.
I'm like, yeah, we bred them for 30 years. So they had two. Stella was the younger. They were a year apart. Stella was still in the puppy category. So she was in a competition with one in the ring, her. So she ended up winning.
Wow.
Championship.
Yeah.
Championship.
Breed, right?
But my kids met her and like they are a friendly breed.
Sure.
And she's super friendly. So my wife was like, we'll get their number. We'll see the next time.
Sleep on it, right?
Yeah, we'll keep in touch with
Right.
them. It's like,
Sure.
we'll look into your Bernese Mountain Dog. I'm like, okay, thank you. So fast forward, COVID comes.
Yep.
In following March, nobody is breeding, but we stayed in touch with a couple and they're like, we think we want to focus on our older dog. Like, would you be interested in getting Stella? At that point was almost 2.
Okay.
And we had met her and my wife was all in. She was
Sure.
like, yes, we can get Stella. That was her name. Like,
Right.
I didn't give her a new name. So that's how we got her. We retired her from being a show dog, which I don't really think was her passion.
Sure.
But within a week, I was like, she would be great at therapy because she had such a friendly personality and she loved everyone she met.
Awesome.
So I'm like, this would be a way to, there are a working breed.
Yeah.
I mean, they're supposed to be draft animals. Like they pulled carts in Switzerland hundreds and hundreds of years ago. I'm like, well, I'm not going to have her pull carts, but
Right.
maybe she can be a working dog in a different way. And the Lightning helped, again, facilitate kind of the connection with TGH. Took a little while with COVID to actually get her certified
Mm-hmm.
because a lot of the organizations weren't doing it. But once that cleared up in 2021, I got her certified and we've been going to
That's
TGH
awesome
ever
stuff.
since.
But why, Mish? Like why did you feel like you had to do that? Like what was in you? What was your motivation for going in there? A lot of people say that, hey, I want to go and help, volunteer and bring my dog in. But what was there something inside of you that you were like, I really feel like this is going to help people that are in the hospital?
Well, there was that part of it for sure. And I mean, I think the Lightning advance a philanthropic spirit
Mm-hmm.
through a lot of the different events that
Yeah.
they set up, charge.
Heroes,
I mean,
all that stuff.
and I've done all of that. And look, I'm down to going down to the Riverwalk and picking up garbage. Like
Sure.
I'm fine doing that.
Sure.
But I'm like, I can spend time with this dog who would she would be really good at it. I knew that. And that's a way to give back in a really impactful way.
Which is awesome.
And so once I started doing it, I didn't really actually give it much thought. Like, why wouldn't I do it? It was
Right.
kind of like once I realized that she would be really good at it, I was excited about pursuing it
Sure.
and doing it. And that's the benefit again of not wearing 7 hats.
Understood.
Right.
you
In the
can focus.
minors, I
You
was
gotta do it.
working during the season. I don't even know how many hours I worked, but it was basically a full day plus games, plus travel and all of that. During the off season, you're still going in 9 to 5 or whatever, Monday through Friday. At the NHL level, it's kind of like you
Different.
do your broadcasting, do your writing, but like you want to do this thing with your dog, great,
Go for it.
do it. So
All right. Well, we got to.
yeah, we talked.
let's go back to hockey. Yeah,
so
so-
phone it in. And
and-
want to talk
but-
about the book.
But hockey, like you've been part of almost 1,000 or probably over 1,000 minor league games you've called.
I was at about 1,000 in the minors. I
Okay.
need at some point to count them up. Yes.
22 years of calling NHL hockey,
Yeah.
right? I don't imagine there's much that you've seen like lately that would surprise you, but I was kind of curious, like what was the last thing that you saw on the ice that you were like, wow, I haven't seen that before?
Interesting.
Yeah. And you know what, Kobe? Something just came up and I was like, I don't know that I've ever seen this before. And now I can't remember what it was. It was just this year. Phil and I were like perplexed that it happened on the
I
ice.
feel like I remember this.
Yeah.
What the heck?
It was some like obscure rule that
Was it the puck that hit the corner of the board and they didn't know if it was I remember this. I remember you guys talking about this. I don't know if that was it, but it was something that happened and you're like, I don't think I've ever seen this before.
I will say this, and this is not the thing because I don't remember whatever it was. Goal interference has been very difficult
Yeah.
to wrap your head around.
Yes.
And so I do have a story here as well. So you were on the team at this point, Kobe. It was the bubble year, but it was before we paused the season. The Lightning had a game in Dallas. I think we were coming out of the All-Star break. And I had a family commitment. So the team was like, we'll send you day of. It was a night game. So I got to the airport, and Tampa to Dallas is not a complicated flight. I get to the airport for this flight to Dallas. Who's waiting in the terminal? Don Koharski.
Oh, wow.
who's former NHL
Yep,
official, but
official, yeah.
supervisor. He was supervising the game in Dallas. Excuse me. So, like, we've known each other, and the Lightning just had a goalie interference situation. I can't remember if it was for or against, but I didn't understand. I'm like, can you please explain to me
Yes.
goalie interference? It's rare that I would have this opportunity. He's like, I'm going to break it down for you.
Okay.
If there's contact in the blue paint, there's no goal unless the attacking player is pushed into the goalie.
Okay.
That's the goalie's domain. Outside the blue paint becomes
It's a great
50-50.
Yeah.
Who initiated contact,
Right.
who had right to that space. The minute the goalie leaves the blue paint, if there's contact outside the blue paint, the goalie loses a lot of his advantage. I'm like, okay,
So
well,
I should have
that's
been running goalies this whole time.
Yeah.
You know,
So that-
goalie stopping the puck behind the net. That should have been the go.
and it was funny because at that point, Corey Perry was playing for Dallas.
Yeah.
And he's like, watch Corey Perry tonight. He's going to be in the blue paint. He's going to make contact with the goalie. And there's going to be something like, sure enough, like that game, something happened with Corey Perry in the blue paint.
Who would have thought?
Yeah.
Who would have thought? So that really helped.
Okay.
And I think that I wasn't batting 1,000, but even on the air, like it'd be a challenge and I'd see it. That's in the blue paint.
Right.
I don't see the attacking player being pushed in. I think that this is going to be a no goal. And I was getting them right more than not.
Got it.
I feel like in the last year, I have been completely swinging and missing. And it's been weird stuff like Igor Shesterkin is out of the crease of his own volition. He's trying to get back in the crease. And Tanner Jeannot is standing there, but Shesterkin initiates the contact. He pulled himself out of the crease. Jeannot has a right to his space.
Yes.
And anyway, at the other post, AC Mott scores on a breakaway. I think it was Trocheck or Zibanejad, one of them. He's the one that doesn't let Shesterkin get over to make the save.
And we
So that is like
Right.
super complicated, right? Like, how does the crease come into play here? And so, of course, it was ruled
no
goalie interference,
Right.
right? And I was like, I don't like that call. Like, Shesterkin, yeah, there was contact in the crease. Shesterkin initiates the contact because he voluntarily
Moved
skated out of the crease. And even if Jeannot isn't there, his own player is going to prevent him from getting over and making the save. And I'm just like, they've lost sight of the spirit of the rule. The spirit of the rule is, was the goalie able to play his position?
Got it.
That should be kind of the determining factor to me for whether a goal is allowed to stand or not to stand. And it's almost like what Don was explaining about the crease.
Yes.
That has taken precedence.
Sure.
It's like, well, it was in the blue paint. So like the goalie, somebody blew in his ear and it's coming off the board. And like outside the crease, the goalie got run over, but it was outside the crease. So
Right.
good goal. And
Yeah.
it's just like, was the goalie able to make a save? You know?
So,
But
Also, you know what the one was? It was against Florida.
Yeah.
Vasilevsky, his glove, he's trying
Yes.
to stop the puck.
Yep.
And the Florida player makes contact with the glove.
So we could-
Vasi's skates are in the crease.
Right.
But they said, well, his glove was outside the crease. I'm like, are you kidding me? Like in the crease to me, like the goalie skates are in the crease.
Right. Then
That to me is in the crease.
Right.
The fact that he's reaching out to try and glove the puck, he should be allowed to do that if his skates are in the crease. Sorry, I got worked
No,
up.
I'm glad that I asked you because it kind of segues into my next question about, obviously you're very passionate about this. You're very passionate about hockey and the team and everything that goes on. Has that passion ever got you in trouble? Has there ever been conflict, whether it was with internal with the team, whether it was management or other broadcasters or let's say the league? Has there ever been, I'm assuming there maybe has been, but has there ever been a situation where you've had to be, had to address a situation like that?
I think the closest that I came to crossing a line that I wasn't happy crossing was getting worked up about officials. I would never.
And who like, was it the league that came to you and said, hey, Dave, like,
No, it's more
lay off?
me,
Oh, it was-
actually.
it was in,
Like, I'm not had the game ends, and I'm like, I'm not really happy that I got worked up about that call.
right.
Um,
But someone from the NHL has never called you and said,
no,
you cannot say that. Or
they
you
don't
can't
listen
do
to
that."
radio.
It's
Dave,
come on.
I think working with Phil probably helps because Phil is more likely to get worked up about
Oh, yeah.
officiating
We've
than
listened and
than
heard.
me. But some of that is
So you
my
guys
own
play a little
choice.
good cop, bad cop. You got to play the good
I get
cop
worked
too.
up about it too. I mean, I just
Sure.
got worked up about the goalie interference. Opposing players, I understand. Like, there's no. you want to be on the ice and chirp an opposing player, that's your right as a player.
Yes, it
as
is.
a broadcaster, there's no way that I'm going to do that, although I will get fired up at times
Sure.
about a play happening. You know, it was a good example, 0-4 final, and some fans have come up to me and they're like, we love this call. And I was kind of like cringing, but like Kiprusoff was unbeatable in the 2 games that Calgary won. We're down 2-1, game 4. Lightning get a 5-on-3 in the first like minute of the game. And Brad Richards, like, he put everything in. It was top of the left circle. He blasted it. Like, it was whoop, top shelf.
Oh,
And we were coming off a shutout. Like, Kiprusoff had a shutout in
Right.
3. Kiprusoff couldn't get there. And like, in the moment, I'm like, how did that feel, Kiprusoff?
Oh, yeah. I kind of remember.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And afterward, I was like, I really wish I wouldn't have said that. But like, I was caught up in the moment, and nobody from Calgary was like, boy, that Mishkin, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
You know, it was more like that puck was in game 6. That was what we hear from the Calgary people. So I tend not to like it when I let myself get that carried away, and it doesn't really happen very often. But nobody has ever actually come to me and said, you really shouldn't have said that. It's more my own internal kind of
Well, what about
judge and jury.
what about your partnership with Espo?
Yeah, I was gonna say,
how did that whole thing develop?
Has anything flown out of his mouth that you're like, oh boy, we're gonna hear about this?
That's probably a better question for Versnick, because I don't know.
Laughing over there, so
Yeah.
shaking his head, yes.
I think Steve might correct me if I'm wrong. I think when we were playing, again, you were in the series, Kobe. We were playing Montreal in 2015, and they were the favorite. That was the year Carey Price won the Hart Trophy.
Yep.
Speaking about goalies,
Yeah.
hard for goalies to win the Hart Trophy. 2015, Carey Price won the Hart Trophy. So the Lightning had just come out of this Kobe, the star of Game 7, but very difficult Detroit series. So we go up to Montreal on virtually no rest. I think we won Game 7 and had to like go right up there and play. 2 days later, Game 1 goes into double overtime.
Okay.
So in the first overtime, Kucherov scores. I think it was Kuch. And they ruled no goal because he like pushed Carey Price's pad over the goal line. Phil was livid. He was like losing his mind about this. So in double overtime, Kuch scores.
Right.
Which, by the way, I think they found should not have counted because Philpool was offside, but this was before the offside challenge.
Okay.
And so Phil like started yelling at the referee, like, you know, should have been over like 20 minutes ago or something like that. You
It was my
dummy.
bedtime.
Right.
Yeah. So I think Steve had to do some fancy editing after the fact. But look,
So-
Phil and I share kind of what we see brings out passion.
Absolutely. I think that's why our fans respect it so much, is because they know how passionate you guys are. Have any other members of the media or opposing fans, because you're in the booth, right, and you're pretty loud and animated, has anybody gotten pissed at you or mouthed off at you to like, keep it down up there? Like, I'm just curious because you're very animated.
Yeah. So in that same Detroit series, Tyler Johnson scores in Game 4. Like, it was probably one of the most improbable, amazing comebacks that I've experienced for a team that I'm representing in a playoff game.
Yes.
Lightning were down 2-1 in the series. They're down 2-0 in Game 4. They couldn't generate. Detroit had D'd up the Lightning in those 2 games. Like, nothing was happening. And then Luke Glendening was in Tyler Johnson's back pocket.
Yep.
I'm not sure if Glenny got like a minor penalty. It turned into a 4-on-4, and Johnson was not guarded.
Right.
Scores 2-1, and then sets a plot 2-2. And then Glendening ends up like getting dinged up and has to leave the game and is not out for overtime. Johnson scores in overtime, and I like let
Lost
loose,
it.
right? And so he threw a water bottle. There was a fan because at the Joe, like the press box is right
there,
by the
right?
seats. Yeah. Now it's way different in their new building. So somebody threw a water bottle at me. It was empty, fortunately, and it missed. So he didn't have good aim.
Did
They
you
were
say
pretty.
anything?
They were
I go,
pretty
"You
annoyed.
missed."
I would have threw it
Yeah.
back.
I know.
Yeah, yeah. I was too busy celebrating. But
All right. Well, because I know we've been talking for a while now, but go ahead.
Yeah, we
got to
get to
about
the book.
I want
Yeah.
to talk about the
Steve
book.
can turn this into a 2-parter,
He
like he
could
does
if
with
he has
Martini
to.
Mondays.
You know, I've heard. But yeah, let's talk about the book, because I mean, I heard that you had started writing this almost like 19 years ago. Is that correct? You like
Late 2000s.
So like, yeah. So
Yeah.
a long time ago, kind of shelved it and then just got right onto it to complete it. So tell us, what was the inspiration of this story?
So I had the idea for a story that I thought would be interesting, and this is the book. So the arc was the same.
Sure.
So in Blind Squirrel, Noah Nicholson, he's a minor league hockey player, the captain of his team, who's silently struggling with his mental health.
Okay.
When he was 12, his parents die in a car accident. He's dealt with mental health issues ever since. He's had a successful career, but then he sustains an injury and is forced to retire. And it's at that point that he's able to begin the healing process. And the Noah at the end of the book is in a much better place than the Noah at the beginning of the book. That's the arc. I basically had that as an idea. So I'm like, well, what do? I'd never really written it. Certainly not. So I'm like, okay, let me start chapter 1 and started writing. And I wasn't really happy with what I was producing.
Sure.
It wasn't as good as the story idea. And so 2 things happened. First of all, I found I couldn't advance the story.
Okay.
It's kind of like some people are like, well, you have an idea and you just start writing and what's around this bend? Ooh, that's a great idea. I was like, what's around this bend? I have no idea what's around this bend. So there was that. And also I didn't like what little I had produced. Sure. I kept going back and trying to change it. And I'm just like, this is driving me crazy. I also had 2 young children at the time. Plus a full-time job. I'm like,
busy.
This is not happening. So I put it away.
Yep.
I'm like, maybe I'll come back to this someday. I still think the idea is a good idea, but maybe it's just not in the cards. And so I literally, I didn't really think about it at all. It was just easier not to think about it because it annoyed me to think about it. So 2022, we're down to Toronto in the first round, 3-2. Lightning came back and won that series.
Yep.
But it was looking like it was going to be the first kind of longer off season that I had in a while. And in past off seasons, I had always a project going on, like I paint the house or whatever. I had nothing planned.
Gotcha.
And I said so to my wife. And she's like, well, why don't you go back to that novel that you started all those years ago? And I was like, yeah, right. And I didn't go back to it at the computer. What I did do, though, was start thinking about the story.
Gotcha.
And so I kind of gave you the arc.
Yeah.
And I tried to write it as I explained the arc, and I got stuck really early. I'm like, I'm going to leave that alone. What does this recovery look like? I started thinking about kind of the second half of the book, and I knew he was going to meet someone. So I'm like, what's her story? Like, how do they meet? Why do they connect? And the first puzzle piece fell into place. And your brain can work way faster than your fingers.
Sure.
Right. And I had about a 5 or 6 week period as the Lightning beat Toronto, beat Florida, beat the Rangers. I was calling the games, but every waking moment that I wasn't focused on broadcasting, the story was coming together in my mind. I described it like the opposite of peeling an onion. I was putting the onion back together.
Interesting.
And I got more and more excited about this is a cool idea and I can build on this element that way. So by the time we got to Denver for the final, I basically had the story written in my head. I didn't, but I did.
Sure.
And so I remember we landed for game 1 a couple of days in advance. I went to the hotel room and I wrote a chapter outline. I had 14 chapters.
Wow.
And I'm like, I know exactly what's going to happen in each of these chapters. So the difference for me, writing something like this, I needed a roadmap.
Yeah.
I needed to know the beginning, middle, and end. I couldn't look around the corner and be like, well, what's going to happen there? I needed to know what's there.
Sure.
And so when I actually sat down to write it, I wrote the whole thing. I mean, you can see how thick this is. I wrote it in 3.5 months. So, I mean, it just spilled out of me.
Did you work with a publisher? I mean, obviously, if that's not something you were privy to as a prior career, to just write a novel, I would think you needed some sort of guidance from a professional along the way. Or no, you wrote it down, you got it to a publisher, and they were like, this is amazing, we want to distribute it. How does that whole process?
Yeah, I wish it were that easy.
It seems like
so the writing part I had to finish first, and then I had a manuscript, so it's sitting in my computer in a Google Doc. I'm like, well, what do I do from here? So look, I've had the benefit of meeting a lot of people through my professional life, college.
Sure.
I knew classmates who were kind of in the publishing world or in the newspaper world. So I got an education for several months about kind of the path to publication. And what I ended up deciding to do, I linked with St. Pete Press. Okay. They're a local outfit. And essentially I was like, I don't want to wait. Could I have gotten a deal commercially? Maybe, maybe not, but it would have taken a long time. Yeah. And I'm like, this thing is ready.
Let's roll. And
it's kind of like YouTube. You can a la carte it. Now, maybe your YouTube video gets no views, sure. Right? But you can put it out there.
Right.
And I'm like, I can put this out there, but I don't know enough to just completely self-publish. This is my first rodeo, so I needed help. That's where St. Pete Press
came into play.
Was awesome. So I linked up with them. Their editor, Amy Cianci, was awesome. So the editing process actually took me a little bit longer than I thought. We kind of started like beginning the process last summer where I sent her and her copy editor the manuscript.
Yep.
Edit it.
Got it.
Like she's like, go through it, get it as clean as you want to get it, send it to me.
Got it.
She read it for content. She came back and said, I have very little to give you here. This is basically ready to go.
Wow.
So I was really happy to hear
Amazing.
that. The
Give you
syntax,
some homework.
Right?
the syntax was a different story. So,
Sure.
so I had a copy editor who was like, you don't actually need the comma here. And like in this instance,
Okay.
like it goes inside the quotation, not outside the
But
quotation.
they do that. Or do they?
They knew that. So she flagged some stuff, but
Okay.
I'm like, she flagged it, but I know I have more instances of this
Right.
through the book. So it was almost like combing for lice.
Oh,
I was
wow.
going through this manuscript, checking like,
Everything.
so I now understand this rule. Now I have to make sure that the rule is applied properly.
Right.
Would it have made a difference to most readers? Probably not, but it made a difference to me.
Sure.
So look, the turkey needed to stay in the oven a little bit
Right.
longer, and then it was ready. And I was glad that it was ready in time before the season ended,
yeah.
basically.
The
So I could
sold out at
piggyback.
your signing was amazing. On
So the Lightning being in season helped, and they've been great about helping me promote it.
Yeah.
And look, so the way it works is you can buy it online. Like
Okay.
you can just go online and buy
Fine.
the book. But as an author, I can get author copies, which cost less.
Right.
Yeah.
You're getting
I mean,
it
I wouldn't pay
wholesale.
retail
Right.
for my own book,
Right.
right? So those books I can sell at the
Gotcha.
same price,
Gotcha.
and there's a little bit a better profit margin than if
If you were to do it through
it
like
were to
a-
go through Amazon or BarnesandNoble.com.
So, Mish, I wanted
So-
to ask about the title.
I will, but
Yeah.
like I had to get these books in. I didn't know how many to get, so I ordered 120.
I'm
We
not
sold
surprised.
Yeah,
we sold about 20 at a private event for people who help with the book. Then I brought it out to this event for the light. I'm like,
All
I have
the
4.5 boxes. Am I going to bring home 4.25 boxes?
And you brought
Yeah.
home none.
Brought home none. Yeah.
Amazing.
So it was great. So now I have another order coming in, which is taking a
There you
while.
go. But yeah,
I'm not surprised. It's a huge success, and the people that you have a lot of fans.
He
You've
does.
been here for a long time. You have a huge history with the team, and people I think really respect and your ability to tell a story.
Yeah.
Because on the radio, that's what you're doing. You're telling a story, and then the fact that you can put it to print is amazing. But yeah, let's talk about the title and the cover art. How you
Yeah.
created that.
So my protagonist, Noah Nicholson, has an expression that he uses in the book, which some people have heard, many people have heard. Some people have never heard that before, but it's sometimes even a blind squirrel finds a nut.
Yes, I've heard that.
So he says this.
Okay.
So that's part of it, but the term has layers.
Of course.
So like he suffered this childhood trauma, and like there's an element he's not really facing it, right? Like the vision part of it
Gotcha.
is in there. His injury is to his eye.
Oh,
He can see,
okay.
but
Got it.
so I mean,
Subtleties.
yeah. So like, I'll say this: this is not a dense novel. If you read it, I wrote purposely crisp, clear prose. It flows,
Love it.
but I believe that it also has depth. I try to add some depth to the story where you don't need, like, you can just read the story, and if you like the story, great.
Yeah.
But if you like some layered meanings in there, I was able to work some of that in there too, which is why, like, at the end of the day, I was really happy with how it turned out. Unlike the first time, where
Sure.
I was like, I need to step away from this. I'm not happy.
Well, I mean,
This time,
everything
this
happens
time
for
I
a reason,
was.
right?
so the artwork there, the Lightning have a graphic design team,
Yes, they do.
which I didn't even know.
Yes, we do.
Yeah.
All the graphics.
Well, I'm not
you
in
see
the
it out.
office.
Well, I'm understood. But all those graphics, yeah, Franzone's crew does all that.
Yeah. So I walked into their office last summer. We were still in the playoffs against Toronto last year. I found out about this. So I walked in there. I'm like, who here can draw a squirrel? They're like, you want to talk to Nick Meter?
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, he wasn't in. So I went back and saw Nick. He's like, Nick is our best artist.
Yep.
So I told him what I wanted. He basically nailed it almost immediately. Ironically, like within a month, Nick left the light. He's
I
now
know,
working with
I
a
know.
different company, but I was so happy. Like that's I cannot draw. So I
Sure.
needed some help with that, and he nailed it.
He did.
So I'm really happy with how
Awesome.
it
And
turned
it's cool.
out.
You got some quotes here on the back from Coop and
Yep.
Julian and Phil. That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
Congrats to you. And guys, pick that one up. Support our buddy Dave Mishkin here, of course, on the Bolts Block Party. Dave, before we head out of here, we always do a segment on the show called Fact or Fiction, presented by our friends at Highline
heard it.
IPA. Okay.
I listen.
So these, again.
I think I gave you all the facts about me in the last hour, didn't I?
No, not really, because not all of them are specifically about you.
We're scratching the surface.
We're scratching it. All right, you ready? Here we go. Dave Mishkin, Fact or Fiction. If there was a Mount Rushmore of Lightning players who have made the biggest impact on this organization, it would be Marty, Vinny, Stammer, and Cooch. Fact or fiction, in your opinion?
And I can only pick 4.
Can only pick 4 that have made the biggest impact on this organization.
I need to get Andrechuk on there.
Okay.
And I'm not sure who I would take out because Andrechuk was one part, but a very, very big part
Sure.
of the key to winning the first cup.
Okay.
And that first cup, like there are hockey fans today that love the Lightning because they were kids watching the Lightning win in 04. And I don't think that 04 cup happens if Dave Andrechuk doesn't join the Tampa Bay Lightning.
Okay.
Guy's a statue out in front of the arena, but I'm not sure. That's a hard one.
I know.
I kind of threaded the needle there.
You did.
I'll say fact just because you can't really take any of those off.
Okay.
I want a 5th one though.
Okay. We're
going to make the Lightning Rushmore or whatever.
I like it.
Well, I only have one.
That's fine.
And so Steve Versnick, our producer here, I was going back and looking at different pictures and all this stuff online. And one of them was from the 2021 playoffs. And it looked like you guys were all growing beards. You have a beard right now.
Yeah.
But my fact or fiction is Steve Versnick's beard is the thing of little children's nightmares. Fact or fiction?
I think it's got to be fact, although I don't remember his beard. So I must have blacked it out. So yes, it is fact.
It's fact.
Because I can't even conjure it up.
Yeah, I had to get Steve in here.
That's a good one. All right, fact or fiction, Dave Mishkin. In your free time when you're not writing novels, you're an avid swimmer.
That is fiction.
You're an avid runner.
Yes.
You still run?
I do. The body does not accommodate the long runs like it used to. So back in the day when Paul Kennedy traveled, and he used to travel, we would run together. And he was the one that got me out of the hotel gym. He was like, we're in Los Angeles. We're going to see where they shot the opening scene from Gilligan's Island. And so like we'd run to Marina Del Rey and he's like, right there. That's like,
run back.
So he gave me all the routes in the different cities. Philly, we'd run by Boathouse Row.
Yeah. Would he talk the whole time?
Yeah, basically, look at this statue, this guy. So I was getting an education as well. So he doesn't really travel as much anymore, but I still follow the routes that he kind of showed me in the different cities. But I can't crank out the long miles anymore.
You know you're in shape if you could run and then just talk and sightsee and tour guide for 45 minutes straight.
That's PK all day. All right, in our final fact or fiction, Dave Mishkin, the city you most enjoy broadcasting road games from is Vancouver.
I don't know that I've ever actually stated this, but that is fiction.
Okay, so what is your favorite
I think it's Montreal.
Is it?
Well, the viewpoint is great.
Okay.
And I go back to that 04 run the Lightning had. So the Lightning won the second round, they play Montreal. They win the first 2 games at home. Montreal, they outkicked their coverage that year. They beat Boston in the first round. They were down 3-1. They kind of like beat their rivals and they were like, hey, we won a series. And the Lightning are like, yes, you're going to be our second round opponent and we're going to carve you up. And that's basically what happened. But the building, so they came in down 0-2, heavy underdogs. It may have been the loudest building I've ever been in. I couldn't even hear myself through the headsets.
Wow.
So I'm like, Montreal, they could be last place. We were just there.
Right.
What were we beating them? Like 5-1 or something in the third period.
Yes.
And they got a little rush going and you could feel the energy building. It is a fantastic place to watch a game and to call a game. I don't know if you found that playing there.
Listen, I have it. My favorite road arena was Montreal. I'm totally with you. It's just a different, like you said, it's a different energy. And the way the stadium's constructed, it's one of the bigger ones. I think it's like 22,000 people.
You're right.
But with the way the stands go, it's very steep. You know, you look at the nosebleeds and there's actually railings for the fans.
Oh, wow.
So they don't go over the railings, right? And that's on every row of seats. So you just kind of feel that. You feel like the fans are on top of you when you're on the ice.
That's
And it was just always, and something about the nostalgia of playing in Montreal and all their history, and they celebrate their history
They
with so
love
much
their
passion.
team. Even if the team isn't good, they love their team.
Sure.
And that's great to see.
Love it.
Yeah.
Mish, thank you for taking
Vancouver's
the time.
not bad either.
No, I mean, it was our favorite, so that's a fiction. So, but thank you for
Thank
taking
you,
the time,
guys.
and the continued success you continue to have is awesome. And
Hopefully we didn't wear out your voice.
Yeah, I was
You know,
saying,
you
we got a lot
gotta be
of-
sharp.
yeah.
We're recording on a couple of days before game one.
Yeah,
so hopefully
you got
I'll
a
rest
couple
up in
days rest,
time.
But we thank you for hopping on the block party. I know it's been like since episode 19, which was many, many moons ago. So awesome stuff here from you. And I know myself and Kobe, we really do appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on, guys.
Thank you. And Bolts Nation, we love you guys. We're going to continue to do this through the playoffs and hopefully all the way through the summer. Hopefully, fingers crossed. But we appreciate you. We appreciate our friends at Highlight IPA for powering another episode of the Bolts Block Party. You guys have a good one.